Hi everyone and welcome to Make It Happen TV. This afternoon I have got a fabulous guest with me. You may know him and you may not. His name is Maaz Sheikh. Maaz, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Spencer.
Wow. Now, do you know him? Maybe you don't. Do you know Starsplay? If you know Starsplay, then you'll know that this guy recently raised over $150 million to develop his business. Now that sounds extreme. Let's take a look at some highlights and then we'll ask him some questions. Does this look like a really formal interview, us facing each other like this?
No.
So a lot of people have this idea in their mind about successful business people. That just on its own, that heading on its own, raised $150 million. It's first of all a number that people can't even see. It's just a telephone number, isn't it?
Right.
Not one that we can remember either, like we said earlier. How does that kind of stuff happen? Because even if you said to me, right, you've got to go and raise $150 million, I'd be like, wow, I don't know where to start. And a lot of my audience are on that same page. So how does a man start a business and in a very short period of time, with the various partners that you've got, go out and put that kind of deal together? What did you do?
Well, first of all, that's not my personal wealth, and it's not in my bank account.
Is it
right?
not?
No.
Oh, man.
So that's the first thing.
Will
right?
it be? When is it going to be?
So the investors and shareholders have invested in the company.
Yeah.
Which is I think the more important point about what do we do as a company and how did we get so successful. I think, everything happened in stages for us. We when we first got started, we were very fortunate to meet an investor out of Stockholm, Sweden, and he's the one who took an initial small investment in us and gave us an opportunity to build into a slightly bigger, proven business, and then we had more larger institutional investors come.
So he was like the angel backer at the beginning that said, you know what, I'm going to take a punt on you. It's high risk, but I believe in your concept.
That's correct. That's exactly how it evolved. And that intro was made by a former CEO of mine. And so the lesson learned here is be nice to people you work with, because you don't know who's going to come along and make that one intro that's going to change your life forever. And so he made that intro, flew out there, met this gentleman over dinner in Copenhagen, because he lives in south of Sweden. So Copenhagen was a convenient
Across
place
the bridge,
to meet.
Yeah,
exactly.
Malmo or somewhere, yeah.
Exactly. So we met in Copenhagen, and he had launched a streaming service in the Nordic markets, built it into a successful business, and sold it back to HBO. And he loved the idea of doing the same in the Middle East and Africa markets. And
was he just then a money guy? Or was he a guy that had great value and great advice and great experience to share with you?
Exactly. I mean, he was a little bit of everything. He was a co-founder in the business. He's a mentor, investor, and also a lot more experienced than I am. And then also my experience, perhaps especially in the last 10 years, was limited to this region in the Middle East and Africa. Yeah. Peter's experience was much broader, and he had much more exposure also in US and Europe. So when we traveled together to meet other investors, he brought a lot more credibility to the table. And at the same time, I brought sort of an executional, operational hand to the table, because investors knew that Peter's experience is mostly in Europe. And so I was more sort of the executional person on the ground, whereas Peter had that broader vision and vision, if you will. So together we made a great team. And so he's the one who took the initial risk along with some friends and family investment. And that's how we got started.
Now, did you consider yourself an entrepreneur?
Throughout my family, starting with my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my dad, my brother, my older brother, we've had a series of entrepreneurial ventures. My dad had tried something, even as late as when he was 65 years old. He retired from a full-time job and gave entrepreneurship a try. So we always had this bug in our family, and so did my older brother. But we had mixed success with it.
Well, hold on a minute though. Well, was it entrepreneurship, or was it this kind of like solopreneur, or kind of like a sole trader or one-man band? Because I think they're different. And a lot of people talk about the word entrepreneurial because they've started a business on their own, but many people have failed, and a lot of people have started a business and still run a one-man show. Was in that kind of that DNA, that gene pool, that kind of experience, was it people with big ambitions to do big things in the family, maybe not happening or happening, or was it just like, I want to be my own boss?
No, it was, for example, my dad's was a chemical engineer and worked for bigger corporations all his life. And then towards the end of his career, when he retired from a steady career, he was doing a management buyout of a large manufacturing plant that he was running, and he did do a successful management buyout, and he did run it for 3 or 4 years. So this is a plant with over 700 or 800 employees. Okay. So he did take a big risk and did a management buyout with help of a bank financing them, and so it's I would say it's always been in the family, and my brother tried it as well, and so I felt it is in the family, and I do sort of carry those family's dreams, and just like lots of other people, strapped onto my chest and trying to live them.
This business you've got with Starsplay. People here in the Middle East will know exactly what it is. Whenever I say to people, "Have you heard of Starsplay?" Everyone's like, "Yeah, of course I have." Do you think that there's a chance it could fail, or are you pretty much, with that kind of funding behind you now, are you pretty much over that kind of worry, high risk, potential panic scenario into the, we've matured as a business now, even though we're young in terms of the years, we've matured as a business now, and we're pretty confident that we can get where we want to go?
No, there's definitely risk involved still. And while we have some early success, we still have a long ways to go. So, I still wake up, in the middle of the night, and so do my colleagues. We all worry about things at work. I don't think we think that we've crossed that chasm yet. I think there's still a long ways to go. And this is a business and an industry that's very much in flux, right? You'll have very, very established businesses that have been around. You look at what's happening in U.S., businesses that have been around for 50, 60 years are just, slowly decaying and dying away because this industry is shifting. So we cannot take anything for granted. So we still very much feel like we're under the same sort of pressure and intensity that we were 3 years ago. So the risks have changed, but they're still there. I wouldn't say we are safely on the other side.
So when do you think you will be?
I think part of it, Spencer, is I think just personalities as well, right? So one of the things that scares me the most about us as a team and as a company is complacency, and complacency. It starts with complacency, and then it leads to arrogance. Companies and individuals start thinking, we are there, and we have built this brand, and now we are there. I think that's perhaps the worst thing a company and employees can do to themselves.
That is what got me fired 7 years ago. is complacency and arrogance.
Yeah,
I thought I'd made it. I thought I thought the shit didn't stink.
Yeah.
Okay. And that literally destroyed me. Rather than being humble and continue to be innovative.
Yeah.
So I get that.
Well, I think, it's like the famous adage, our strengths are our weaknesses, right? So what makes great entrepreneurs and successful, whether you're a team lead or a CEO, what makes a great team lead is their ability to articulate a vision, their conviction, their belief in themselves. At the same time, those things go out of balance, and you have an arrogant, totally disjointed team lead who does not connect with their 6-person or their 60-person team. Mm-hmm. And so you have to keep these things in balance. And this is why I think in our business, as much as conviction and confidence is important, I think humility and flexibility and empathy are even more important. It's a constant balance. So coming back to your question about, do we feel that we are less risky? And in fact, it seems the other way around now. Now that we have achieved a certain success, we have competitors that used to ignore us 3 years ago now look at us and take us very, very seriously, which is scary because we are competing with some really large global brands and juggernauts. So in essence, it's more scary now than it was when we first got started.
I suppose it's almost like you went from being the underdog in your own space to being the underdog in the world, because you compete, whether it's the Netflix or the Amazons and whatnot. You by definition really are that underdog.
Exactly.
So, what inspires you? Who inspires you?
Well, at some level, I'm no different than lots of other people you and I know, right? So
you've raised $150 million. You're a rock star. That's rubbish.
Well, the company did, right? Again. So I think you look around Dubai and UAE, and you see people come to this part of the world from everywhere, right? From US to Pakistan to Sri Lanka. Everyone comes here, and what do they come for? They come to provide a better living for their families, secure a future for their kids, and do better than what they were doing previously. And so my dreams and ambitions are no different, and were no different. I came to Dubai, back to Dubai, because I grew up here, but I came back to Dubai in 2006 for personal reasons, to be closer to my dad. But then over time, this has become home again, and this is an opportunity for me to create something big for my family. And I have my kids, but I'm also a younger brother to an older sister and an older brother, and I have nephews and nieces, and so it's an opportunity to do something big. And do it for the family. So I guess that's perhaps the most basic motivation. But beyond that, just like everyone else, I'm also a creature of insecurities and passion and pride. And I'd worked at my previous company for a long time, and I hadn't become a CEO. And so sometimes it's shallow things like this that you want to be your own CEO, and you're like, okay, fine. If no one's going to give me that job, I'll go create it, and I'll go become one myself. So added to that deeper purpose and passion, perhaps, are these little insecurities or a little chip on the shoulder that kicks in, and you take these big bets.
Are you competitive by nature?
Yes, I am competitive by nature.
Are you competitive at everything you do? Like, if you go and play, if I said, come on, let's go and play a game of squash, would you be competitive?
Squash, I'll play with you, but lots of other games I won't.
Can win.
But it's funny you say that. My friends tell me that I hate playing sports. I'll go to the gym, I'll go run. I like competing against myself, but I hate to compete against other people because I'm just insecure about losing squash, I'll play.
Okay. You talked about that whole kind of title. I know people in the corporate world that will get a promotion for a new title on their business card, but for no more money. but the significance it gives them is almost payment enough.
Right.
And I find that fascinating. And I'm like, well, you're prepared to take on this extra responsibility for this company you work for to get this title on your business card, but no more money for the effort you've put in. And that always baffles me, because to me, the significance doesn't play such a big part in my world as it does obviously in theirs. When I was a kid, I was bullied. And I still to this day have great joy in everything I do if I can attach it back to trying to stick two fingers up to those people that gave me shit as a kid. And I'm 48 years old, so it's like this should have died a long time ago. And it's a big motivator. It gets me out of bed every day.
Yeah.
But my motivation when I was younger compared to my motivation now had a lot more to do with success than it does now. Back then, it was like, it doesn't matter what the price is that I've got to pay. I want that success and I'll do anything for it. As an older guy, and I think we're similar ages, happiness plays such a big part in my life. And I'm motivated by doing things and being involved in stuff that makes me really happy. Loads of people go to work for many years doing a job they don't love until they eventually find either that they've sold themselves on the fact they're trapped or they find a way out to do what they love. Do you do what you love?
Absolutely. There's nothing I would do, anything else I can do in this world. This is what I love, and this is my passion, and this is what I do. Even in my previous jobs, I've worked as an engineer. I've worked as a consultant. I've had sales jobs, and every previous job I've had, I have to be totally in love with it. Otherwise, it's tough for me to do that job. I really have to enjoy my work. I have to really love it. And when that love does run out with the job, I've probably lasted there 2 or 3 months. Because what happens is you get into this negative cycle. You become irritating to the colleagues around you. You start saying, annoying things to your bosses. And, I look back at my last job and there were several data points where I look back and I say, that probably wasn't right of me to say that. But because you get caught in that negative loop, because you're not in love with that job anymore. So, you find yourself, and if you find yourself in that situation, it's time to move on.
You've got employees. Do you know, honestly, if everyone's really happy? Well, and if you find someone that's not really happy, what do you do?
Well, I know for a fact that they're not all happy, and this is the number one challenge one faces in an organization as we grow larger. And I'm sure there's a few of them that are going to see this interview and they're going to say,
that's me. How did he know?
And look, it's easy to get on a camera and speak on a mic and
no, it's not. It's really hard. It's but what's he saying about me?
But what I was going to say is, this is where I say, yes, I'm saying all these things, but it's hard to live this in practice every day. And this is perhaps our challenge as an organization. How do you balance that motivation level and that energy and commitment level? You can't force people to work till 7 or 8 p.m. It has to come from within, right? You can't force people to go home and get on their WhatsApp or other communication channels and keep plugged in with the service. This has to come from within. And there's two schools of thoughts there. I had a former boss who said, when I sense when the morale in the company is low, I just get new employees. There's that school of thought that says that, look, motivation comes from within. Don't look for it from your supervisor or your manager or your team lead. If you're not self-motivated, you need to find another job. So there's that school of thought. And then there's other school of thought that the motivation and energy should come from the top and the team leaders and managers. And I think there's a little bit of both. I think it's much easier to motivate employees and team members when they're self-motivated and engaged. Mm-hmm. So I'm a believer in one of those where I believe that I believe in picking self-motivated people to begin with, who have a deeper purpose and a deeper passion for what they're doing, and then giving them the environment, hopefully, that lets them excel.
So in essence, then you make your recruitment process tougher because you're putting more time into finding the exact right people rather than people maybe that just have the skills you need.
That's correct. I think technical skills are obviously important, but in the long run, I think personal qualities are far more important than the specific technical skills that a person might bring to the table.
And self-awareness?
So what I look for is self-awareness, humility, empathy, ability to connect with others, and perhaps the most important is a deeper purpose and a connection of what they do day to day with what they're really passionate about. And if those things align, that's the perfect person for us.
In your kind of network of, let's say, associates and friends and stuff like that, how many people, or how often do you spend time with other entrepreneurs and the people that kind of share the same types of values as you and the same types of ideals as you? Is that something you do with frequency?
No, not nearly enough. And when I do get the opportunity to connect and meet other people, in similar situations, it's very, very rewarding, because there is lots of lessons learned, and you realize a lot of us have similar challenges and similar opportunities ahead. But I don't do that nearly enough. I find myself working much closer with our own work colleagues at work, and I rely on them a lot, but not enough outside the company.
Do you think that entrepreneurialism should be taught at school?
I think so, but I also think I'm not sure it's a class that one can teach. I think it's more. I think we need to give students an environment for entrepreneurship rather than a class. Okay. And what I mean by that is, I think the system, the entire system, needs to perhaps change. So, for example, when you and I graduated from college, no one would in college said that I'm going to graduate and one day become a salesperson, right? And why is that?
In fact, none of them ever would.
Yeah, exactly, right? I graduated.
They end up saying, "How did I become a salesperson?"
Exactly. But in my mind, sales is perhaps is the ultimate accountability job, right? You know exactly what you have to deliver. It's the most measurable target. But yet, our universities and colleges have created this culture where sales as a profession for a very long time was frowned upon. But I went from having studied engineering, tried engineering, and realized that, I was smart enough to realize that I'm not smart enough to be an engineer for the rest of my life, because these guys were truly much more hardworking and much more passionate about what they were doing than I was. And I realized that, look, I don't have a long-term career in this. So over time, I did switch to sales, and I found it to be a lot more rewarding for me personally. But I go back to the same way about entrepreneurship. I think our education system has to encourage entrepreneurship in the whole experience, and get people to realize that not necessarily investment banking or a job in a law firm is those are great professions. I'm not telling anyone not to work at a law firm or investment bank.
Don't work at a law firm.
But there are other things in life that one should experience. So for example, with my own kids, I tell them all the time, the first thing you do when you get out in real life, real world, is start your own company. And because it does get more difficult as you get older, right? Between the school fees and the mortgages and the rent payments, things add up.
Tell me about it.
So I do think that hopefully the education system can evolve to give kids and students a little more, and to give them an environment that's more conducive to entrepreneurship.
Most entrepreneurs are business startups fail. We know that. And invariably, it's not necessarily that it was a bad idea. It invariably ends up being poor execution or poor patience or poor persistence that I find a lot of the time. Entrepreneurs, because they haven't had the opportunity to learn how to do it, they're going to start their own business. And what do they need to know and what don't they need to know? With entrepreneurs that you've been exposed to, including your own story, what do you think are the 3 common mistakes that entrepreneurs make that they should be really far more aware of than they are?
I think the first one is, entrepreneurs tend to think that they're lone wolves, but the reality is we're not all Steve Jobs. We can't all be the product visionary, the technologist, the dashing CEO, the marketeer all at the same time. I think if you can find someone and a team to go with you on that journey, I think it'll be far more rewarding and much higher likelihood.
Because being an entrepreneur, period's very lonely.
It's very lonely.
So that team is critical. Yeah,
exactly. So you need that one. You need the expertise and the mind. The thinking behind it. But you also need the support structure, like you said, at a personal level as well. It can. It's vital. So I think having the right team and having the right people around you makes all the difference. But a lot of times I see entrepreneurs trying to do it all themselves. Nothing that others do around them is good enough. And one needs to avoid that mindset. Find that team that they can work with. I think the second thing is again going back to the point about conviction, right? So as much as conviction in that idea is extremely important, one needs the mindset to say, you know what, I made a mistake here, or we made a mistake. Let's go back to the drawing board and rethink that, right? The challenging part is when you get started on this journey, you'll meet 100 people and you'll get 100 different opinions. And if you're going to reshape your idea each time you talk to someone, you're going to end up nowhere, right? So you need that perfect balance of conviction and humility to become successful in the long run. The third one I would say is setting your pride and ego aside. And this is also a tough one because pride and ego is perhaps the one of the 5 reasons why you started this thing in the first place.
Driving you, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And this is why it's this duality, this paradox that one has to continuously manage. The reason I say that is because after being a senior person in a large company here in the region, you get used to certain, you make phone calls and you set up meetings and, you make things happen. You get used to that.
Don't steal my punchline.
But when we started this venture, I waited in lobbies for an hour or two only to be told, hey, the meeting is tomorrow. It's not today. And, what do? You swallow your pride and you show up for the meeting the following day. And you might have to do that again and again. Mm-hmm. And if you start linking that to your personal pride, it's gonna get very lonely, very frustrating quickly. So I think one needs that balance of pride and ego, but at the same time the ability to put that aside and just not let those things define you. Right? It's extremely important that you don't let those things define who you are, and don't let your job, your title define who you are. As much as being a CEO or being an entrepreneur was important to me, at the same time, I kept things in perspective that okay, fine, but these things also do not define me as who I am.
Lots of people are going to be hanging on to every word that you've just said just now, that watch this and are looking at you as somebody that they would aspire to be like. And obviously you're really proud of what you've done, and you should be. My audience will always have questions. So you don't know I'm asking you this right now, so I'm going to surprise you. They're going to have questions, and there are some really talented people out there.
Sure.
Would you make yourself available to have a 15-minute call with the person that asked the best question?
Of course. Happy to do that.
Would you mind?
No, not at all.
Okay, look, often we don't get a chance to do this, guys, and having Maaz here in the studio with us, I think it's really important that we understand that whilst you can see is as humble as hell, the fact is he's done some amazing things in recent times, coming from a very humble attitude. To raise $150 million is one thing, which is incredible. To build a business and to go up toe-to-toe with the likes of Netflix and Amazon really says a lot for the ambition and the inner drive. If you've got a question that you would like to ask Maaz that will help define or help reinvigorate you with your business and your entrepreneurial journey, then send me a message, and I will promise you the best question that comes in, I will promise you I'll get Maaz on the phone or on a Skype for 15 minutes, as he just said, to help answer that. Because I think people that come with the experience that Maaz has got have got so much to share. And for one of you out there, thank you very much for doing it. He's going to share it. The $150 million man, Maaz Sheikh, one of the nicest guys I've ever interviewed. Genuinely, you know, most of you that watch it know. If you like what you see here at Make It Happen, then let us know who else you'd like us to interview. But to be honest with you, I've had such an enjoyable time with you. To meet you the other day was great fun, and to get to know you, and to know that you've got a few lookalikes out there as well.
All over the world.
All over the world, yeah, all over the world. But for now, whatever you do what this guy does, and that's to get out there and make it happen. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.